Our next speaker this evening, delighted to invite, is John Minihan. John did serve for 21 years in the Irish Defence Forces, but it's his extensive political experience that he's drawing on in particular this evening to share with us. John has served as a councillor from 1999 to 2004, a senator from 2002 to 2007, and also ran in 2 general elections in the same constituency that incredibly currently includes Micheál Martin, Simon Coveney and Michael McGrath. John served for 5 years as National Party Chairman for the PDs and part of the 3-man team that negotiated the Pro for Government in 2002. John has long been an advocate for an increase and improved discourse on defence in Ireland, and he has chaired the advisory panel for the 2015 White Paper. So who better to hear from than John on his thoughts on the proposed Commission on Defence. John?
Sorry. Thanks, Pat. And thank you very much for the invitation to participate in the webinars. I've signed into the previous webinars, and I must say there was many insightful contributions, different perspectives, and all of which had a common goal, and that was a goal of the success of our defence forces. So, like in my contribution this evening, I'm purposely trying to add another perspective, and that's around the politics of defence. And in doing so, I'm not overlooking any of the points that were made in previous contributions, particularly in the areas of retention and recruitment, investment in the defence forces, and very valid points made on the reserve and indeed on veterans. So tonight I'm hoping to break my contribution into 4 main headings. I'm going to speak about the delivery of the programme for government and the political party view and understanding of defence. I'll touch on the White Paper experience, a bit on civil military governance, and make some suggestions on a way forward as I see it. I suppose in delivering a programme for government, I think, we need to take a pace back and have a look at it. And in developing a programme for government, it's fair to say that common ground is very quickly established and defined. An agreement on the areas of difference is achieved on the basis of compromise and mutual respect. As a lot of political research goes into it, we look at our international obligations, but very importantly is the compatibility of party leaders. And one rarely sees red lines outside of the normal political posturing, which is mainly for media or the electorate. And if there are genuine red lines, they are bartered on and dealt with as trade-offs. So as of now, I think it's important that we all accept that we are dealing with a programme for government agreed between the 3 government parties, who now as such have suspended their own defence policy as outlined in their general election manifesto. And there may be limited room for manoeuvre on interpretation of the government policy, but it's highly unlikely, as the agreed policy has been underpinned with far greater detail from the discussions that took place in the formation of government. And in the overall scheme of government formation, defence with an expenditure of just over 1 billion faces stiff opposition from the big spending departments, like social protection is 21 billion and health is 18 billion. So it's important to note that in the light of that, the only alternative defence policy out there now is the policy of the main opposition party, Sinn Féin, and to a lesser extent, Labour. And I'm not sure that either of those would enhance the current defence policy or indeed the budget. So the reality is the policy on defence for the next 5 years will be delivered on the basis of an agreed programme for government. And they are the parameters that both the government, the department, and indeed the military will have to work within. So moving on to the political party view and the understanding of defence, I think politicians answer the needs and the demands of their constituents and have to champion, I suppose, the funding in the areas of responsibility that they choose to prioritise. And budgetary expenditure is set on economic realities. And it's rare for politicians in any great numbers to champion defence because it simply hasn't got voter appeal. And this has to be understood and appreciated by the military. And like other sectors, they have to compete for funding because it's not a given. And whereas the situations move and they develop. Like, for example, the coronavirus pandemic has seen the Defence Forces adjust its mission and its priorities with a greater emphasis on its potential to contribute to public health. And the Defence Force culture of relative isolation does not necessarily endear it to the broader society or its political overseers. In truth, I believe that defence will only be given its fair budgetary share. We see a whole of government approach. I would agree with Brian. I welcome the alignment of defence with foreign affairs. And we need defence to sit with a senior government minister. And in my opinion, in the absence of a full seat at cabinet, this is a very welcomed development. And with regard to the white paper, I think it's important to note we were not an independent body, and as such, we did not have the teeth that a commission will have. And the advisory board had different expertise, and we were listened to by the minister, and it was not a talking shop to offer some form of political cover. And the department were skillful and very policy focused. The military were professional and mission orientated, and the scope was wide and open-ended. And politically, I think it's fair to say there was no interference, but while supportive, there was general disinterest outside that of the minister. And the outcome of the white paper, I think, was broadly well received, and in certain quarters it was deemed to be somewhat a progressive roadmap. Now the challenge is to deliver on it. And it provided a whole of government approach to enhancing the defence and security capabilities of the state from up to 2025. But there's a key element in the white paper is the recognition of the requirement to conduct a strategic defence review, which is due to commence early in next year. And in order to ensure the defence policy reflects and incorporates a full updated security assessment and a fresh consideration of the implications of this assessment for overall policy requirements, associated tasks, capability development and resourcing. And I really believe that is a really important element of the white paper, and I hope it will be acted on. And because we live in a fast-changing world, and in recent years we've seen significant evolution in the EU common security and defence policy, including the establishment of PESCO and the EDF, as Brian has referred to. Globally, threats are evolving, and the individual states and international organisations are struggling to counter these challenges. And all of these have a significant implication for the defence forces. And it reinforces the requirement for regular white paper updates and strategic defence reviews. I think there's a need to progress the implementation of the projects identified in the white paper, just under 50% having commenced, and this has to improve with a new impetus, and I'm confident that that will happen. But the Commission on Defence should not be used as a mechanism to pause on the recommendations contained within the white paper, but it should complement its recommendations, amend them where necessary, and enhance its implementation review. With regard to civil-military governance, I think traditionally relationships between the military and the Secretariat have been strained. And this has been highlighted over the years, and it won't go away. Civil-military management has to operate in a manner that recognises and appreciates their complementary roles. There's a considerable scope for greater integration of military and civil management, and a closer and more cooperative working relationship between military and civil personnel within the Department of Defence needs to be developed. Civil servants should have a key role in providing diversity, but also challenging to military thinking. The British Army addressed this and developed a 2-year training scheme, the Army Advanced Development Programme, specifically designed to bring the two sides of the Army workforce, military and civilian, closer together. And I agree with Brian when he said, like, the appointment of Jackie McCrum as the first female secretary of the department at this time is a golden opportunity to address these issues. I believe Jackie will bring a freshness to the department and will view defence through a lens which will be heavily influenced, not by the internal departmental workings of old, but rather by the influences of her professional career to date. And supported by, as Pat said, an experienced Chief of Staff and Vice Admiral Mellett, she will play a key role in the consultative process in advance of drawing up the Commission's terms of reference. With regard to the defence policy, I think in promoting the role of defence forces outside of the defence community, I believe there's a need to speak in terms of security in the broadest sense, and that spans from internal security to human security, economic and industrial security, and crucially cyber security. Neutrality has also been mentioned by Brian, and we won't get into that debate tonight, but even now, our position on neutrality has financial implications, because real neutrality is a very expensive luxury and needs to be debated in the context of an appropriate defence budget. Cybersecurity, well, our investor-friendly status has long been recognised, and Brexit is likely to further enhance that position. The standing of our defence forces as a major factor in foreign direct investment coming to Ireland is generally not appreciated or acknowledged. And we have to protect our foreign direct investment, its intellectual property and its workforce. Any geopolitical analysis by a company considering Ireland as a suitable location will inevitably assess its cybersecurity. And we may well ask, is the shortage of cyber professionals a national security threat? I believe that the defence forces should take a lead in this area. Has the time come for us to create the forces cyber leader course of equal intensity and reputation, for example, to the Ranger Wing, but focused on cyber operations? And we should run this in collaboration with academia and high-tech industry inputs. I believe we should form a cyber course manned in the main by direct entries with appropriate qualifications, and let the defence forces lead a cyber task force. Maybe we can't compete in conventional warfare, but I believe we could box above our weight in the cyber arena by simply boxing clever. With regard to going forward, I think in setting out a narrative for defence debate in the context of Commission on Defence, I think it would be useful to pause and reflect on the relationship between defence and politics. And a simple approach would be to think of defence and politics as 2 points on a triangle. And the other point of the triangle is civil society, which encompasses the Irish economy and Irish society. So clearly civil society sits at the top of the triangle, and politicians and the defence forces are the servants to society. But the practical problem is that these three worlds are very different, and the interfaces between them are complex, and each have different priorities and target audiences. Like society would have the 4 S's, sustenance, shelter, social justice, and safety. The politicians would look at 4 E's, the economy, employment, environment, and the role in Europe. And the defence forces have their own priorities, the 4 D's of strategy, deter, detect, deny, and defend. So you can see that each have their own differing priorities. They also have different audiences. Politicians respond to the electorate. The defence forces respond to the security requirements of the state, as interpreted by the department. And the response of society can be rational and at times irrational. A robust civil society responds to effective leadership at national and regional level. So the politician, defence forces, society triangle is a very complex system. And however, systems are about people and the interfaces between them. And the Commission on Defence, I believe, can act as an interface between politicians and the defence forces and civil society. And the defence forces can enhance this by communicating. To the politicians, they can give the important messages of the defence forces requirements. To civil society, they can ensure that the value is placed on the contribution they make. The defence forces need to promote their own capabilities, ensuring they are understood by policymakers. I believe the defence forces should translate their policies and priorities into a format that can be used as a beacon or a long-term target for their development by providing stability and a unique vital service to the country, without which it could not flourish. I believe they can earn the trust of society through their ethical and effective and efficient practice, and they can protect the community and its functions in the form of support to civil authorities. And sadly, the Defence Forces still appear to lack the requisite level of relevance to the wider community. So how do we proceed? And there is a need for a competent and a politically astute, but not political, general staff to strategically shape the future of our Defence Forces. I believe that the old dogma that the military sticks to its area of competence, soldiering, and the politicians exclusively legislate on defence strategy within the confines of Dáil Éireann, without any meaningful contact between them, is unhealthy for our modern democracy and does not reflect well on either side. The Defence Forces must develop its senior officers to be competent advisors who are savvy and astute in their interaction with civilian officials and appropriate level politicians. One could equally suggest that the department should have an element of military expertise amongst their ranks. And within the Oireachtas, unlike other jurisdictions, we have a very poor record of ex-members of the Defence Forces entering politics. And I often wonder, is that a factor that our defence spending is so low in Europe? And I've no doubt that Cathal will take this to a new level, and he'll become the go-to person on defence in the Oireachtas, keeping it to the fore of the political debate. But I would hope we'll also see formal defence hearings at committee level on a biannual basis, and this would allow for a continuous assessment and evaluation of military and foreign policy. In my opinion, the current oversight of the Defence Forces by the Department of Defence is not always adequately informed and would benefit from being balanced through independent review. And advocacy was mentioned in previous webinars, and I agree, but I propose advocacy at a very different level. There's a need to create an awareness beyond representations at a TD's clinic. The Defence Forces have the ability to move this to a more nuanced level. I worked with a Dr. Maurice Rhodes. She was an economist and government policy advisor for a number of years. And if you went to him with an item for a manifesto and you were all enthusiastic about it, and he'd reflect on it and he'd respond and he'd say, John, when I present that policy to Johnny Murphy over a pint in Glanmert at the weekend, and he says, that's great, Maurice, but what's in it for me? What do I say to him? And I believe that that's the challenge for the Defence Forces. As viewed through the eyes of others, what's in it for me? Because that's how other participants in that triangle think. And I would suggest some particular initiatives that should be considered. It's imperative that the Defence Forces and politicians and government departments need to improve how they communicate with each other. The Defence Forces social media is top of the class, and it's in its presentation. But I believe that they should build on this with a well thought out and targeted program running in tandem with their present campaigns to deliver on developing the interface between politicians, public services, the Defence Forces and civil society. And this is something that should be carefully thought through with a targeted set of objectives and deliverables, with the strategic objective to be in place by the year end, in explaining what's in it for me to politicians, government departments and civil society. A starting point might be a simple workshop introducing the world of politics and policy making to key members of the Defence Forces. In conclusion, the future success of the Defence Forces could be attributed to, instead of looking at policymakers, politicians and public servants, civil society and the Defence Forces separately, they should be treated as an operational whole, as a dynamic innovation system. There's an opportunity to do something new. And this should not be seen as a burden, but it should be something that is interesting, beneficial to both policymakers, public servants and civil society. And I believe the Commission presents an opportunity to develop a model interface between these groups. Thank you very much.